Well, the Liberals are at it again. The Heritage Minister says that the CBC not only deserves more money, and not only do more people want to be on the CBC, but that we should enshrine it in law. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name's Sterling. I'm your host. Liberal Heritage Minister and longtime proponent of censorship, Pascal St-Onge, held a press conference where she detailed her idea on the CBC and how Canadians should be, not only should they be continuing to support the CBC, not only do more Canadians support the CBC than ever, but we should be giving them money on a 10-year plan so they can make their budgets appropriately. There's all kinds of things wrong that I disagree with her statement, and I'll get into that in a minute. But I would like to say that if they were so good with their money, how come we had to keep giving them more and more money throughout one fiscal year? Gave them a big check, then halfway through they said, "Oh, we're out of money. Can you please give us some more?" So if you can't budget, then what are you on about? Why should we be putting it in codifying it, only for you to turn around and say, "Oh, wait a minute, we need more"? That doesn't add up to me. And the whole corporate structure of the CBC is wrong from top to bottom. I didn't bring much in from the press conference into this video, just like maybe 30 seconds or 50 seconds. I found that the translation was kind of stuttery, and I found that she switched back and forth too much. I'm surprised that she spoke English at all. She's notorious for having a horrible position on speaking English, which is a strange position for someone who's the Heritage Minister. Now I can get into the ins and outs of the traditional portfolio of the Heritage Minister and how it's always given to an individual from Quebec. Always. But we won't cover that in this video. In this one, we're just going to address the glaring hypocrisy and inconsistencies in what the what the Heritage Minister is now calling a protection of the culture of Canada by giving everyone freedom of expression.
Information circulates easier than facts. A debate is being monetized by algorithms and social media.
Difficult to talk about pressing issues without being the target of hateful, discriminatory, or simply misleading comments. We hear a lot about freedom of expression. We need to make sure it exists and that it's protected. It's the foundation of a healthy, dignified, and proud society. Yet, this same freedom of expression is currently being exploited and undermined. At the moment, the richest people on the planet control much of our means of communication and our space for dialogue. And what we're seeing is that these people want to influence our stories, the political conditions of every country, and the collective choices we make with an efficiency unrivaled in human history. The worst thing about all this, we have no control over the direction that these platforms will take or how they will increasingly shape our relationship with the world. I am bringing the following proposal forward so that all those who support CBC Radio-Canada, and we are in the majority.
In today's day and age, they call what we just heard Minister St-Onge do as gaslighting. But in my day and age, where I come from, they call it a crock, because there's absolutely nothing in there that is consistent with the way that she and the Liberal Party has been behaving. They don't have any problem with the platform of X. They use it constantly. As soon as they can't get Elon Musk to do it their way, all of a sudden it's an issue. They had no problem censoring Facebook. They had no problem. They have 2 bills of legislation that censor Canadians all the time. They don't care about any of these kinds of things that you're talking about. But because they can't get their own way, because when people go on X, they say their true opinion, she wants to try to convince you that this is the degradation of the freedom of speech, right? Not the legislation that they've enacted. Then you heard her. She's in the majority of CBC. So if you're, I'm going to address that right now, the majority of the CBC. If you're in the majority, then what are you worried about? If you are in the majority, there should be so many people all up and down this country going, hey, leave the CBC alone, blah, 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 blah. but you're not in the majority. And that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about the minority. And secondly, I cannot stand the pompousness, like of CBC Radio Canada. If you're going to say Radio Canada, then you should say CBC, because those are the letters in French. The word is radio in English. The letters are CBC. Don't try to take one and say it's English and then the other one is French, because radio is an English word just as well. Or is it your position that you're not allowed to listen to the CBC radio if you speak English? I can't stand that level of pompous. And I'm not sure that these people see it for what it is, right? And it just bothers me. It gets under my skin. It's like, you know what? Like, pick one and stick to it. It's a phonetic rule that you should apply to the entire word, not just half of the word, and sound like some sort of person who doesn't understand how phonetics works. As I mentioned, I will leave a link to this proposal that she's calling a proposal. She said at the beginning that all of her proposal will be online. So I went and I got it. I didn't want to necessarily bring in the whole video, as I told you. Now, there are a couple of things in this. There's a lot of it that has no merit. It's just her wishes and her dreams and, supposition and a position where they think that you should agree with them or else, just like everything else on the far left. Like, if you don't agree with them, something wrong with you. They do that all the while trying to tell you that freedom of expression is under attack. Who has attacked freedom of expression more in Canada than the Liberal Party? Maybe the NDP. It's neck and neck, right? I'm going to drill down and focus just on a couple of things that she said on the initiatives and priorities, right? The government of Canada, through various legislation and budgetary initiatives, has recognized the necessity of supporting public broadcasting in this period of transformation. Many measures have been implemented to support the Canadian Broadcast Corporation and the media ecosystem more broadly in an increasingly competitive and polarized environment. Like, the Liberal Party are not the ones driving the polarization. Like, we weren't polarized, and then the Liberals came into power, and all of a sudden they were just shoving wedges in everywhere you could turn. Everywhere you look, there's a wedge put there by the Liberal Party, DEI, and everyone on the far left. But that's a different video. I don't want to digress. Then it goes on to say 2 new laws. The purpose of the Online Streaming Act, effective as of April 2023, is to regulate online streaming in Canada. This legislation aims to guarantee that streaming services and other digital actors contribute to the Canadian broadcast system through obligations, notably in terms of Canadian production in English, French, and Indigenous languages. This act updated the CBC Radio Canada's mandate to recognize that its services are further reaching than conventional radio and television. The Online News Act, effective as of June 2023, is another important tool for supporting quality journalism and traditional news. It aims to enshrine the practices of digital platforms, particularly those that share news, to guarantee that they are fairly contributing journalistic content and that they respect the ethical professional standard. This act includes CBC Radio Canada among the organizations that can benefit from this greater equality. I will note that she named the legislation and didn't use the letter number distinctions. The first one, the Online Act, is C11. And the other one, the News Act, is C18. And C18 is the one that made Facebook stop putting up news, right? So Facebook said to Facebook, you owe us money so that we can take the money that you're earning and give it to CBC, so that we can take the news that you might be getting from random people in your neighborhood, doing localized news, because localized news was trashed by the large corporations the second we gave them a tax break. They all pulled out of the localized news. They all pulled out of the First Nations regions, and they decided to put them only in Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, and Edmonton. And then they decided that all of those broadcasts could be handled from one studio. And they started to lose money and they started to go broke. So what we decided to do was to try and tax Facebook. And we said, Facebook, every time you want to put news into Canada, you have to pay us money. And Facebook said, fine, we're not going to run any news. And ever since then, they've been screaming that the Facebook platform is, trying to censor them and give them, attack the freedom of expression by not letting CBC put their news up, right? Because now Facebook bans all the news, right? Some of the reports I put up, they tell me they flag them as news. So I'm not saying to you that Facebook is right or wrong. I'm saying to you that this piece of legislation that she talks about with such consequences having a strong impact on the Canadian culture has actually been devastating to both freedom of expression and the freedom of information, like the passing of knowledge from one group to another. Because let's be straightforward. The reason that they wanted it was because then they could pay Facebook to shove CBC into your feed. But most people are only listening to their friends. So if their friends said, oh, look, this happened in my neighborhood, they'd be like, okay, great. But the corporation and the government wanted to treat it like just another news broadcast where they could cram it down your throat, and nobody said a word. The population said nothing, and the liberal government, lost their mind. Because the liberal government doesn't have an understanding of how people think or how they behave. They are just hell-bent on controlling you, because that's what socialism is. It's control. It's not about, being together in unity. It's about doing what a very few select people try to tell you to do. And I can support that with my position on C11, which is a much worse piece of legislation from where I'm considering, from where I sit. The independent Canadian content creator. The guy who doesn't have 900, directors and middle management and 400 cameramen and sound technicians and an editing bay and buildings and studios all over the country, and members of legislation or members of the House of Commons coming forward and saying that I should be given money. No, I'm just a one-man show. And when the Senate said Bill C-11 doesn't protect the individual Canadian content creator, the Liberal government refused to extend protections to them. So, see, what C-11 says is that you have to be dealing with Canadian content. So if you're not Canadian content, the Liberal government has the right to limit your access to the Canadian ecosystem, in her words. And so what does that mean for me? That means because I'm not protected under Bill C-11, though I am a Canadian and though I am an independent, and all of the things that she lists off, for some reason, only CBC, CTV, like Bell, CBC, Global, only the big corporations are protected. If you're not in their clique, you're not protected. So when Google paid $100 million into this fund, the people that are in their clique, the companies and corporations, the massive multinational corporations in some cases, got money. But me, I got turned down in the algorithm. I get turned down constantly. You can't even, they show you, right? And so, my videos are going along, and then all of a sudden they just completely tank from 1 hour to the next, right? Now, the algorithm doesn't work like that unless somebody reached in and turned it off. The computer would still be trying to show it to people if it's already gaining traction. But as soon as mine starts to gain any kind of attraction, it just falls right off the cliff. And it's not even gradual. It's just like somebody went in and turned a switch. Now, Bill C-11 gives the CRTC that kind of power, where they can say, oh, well, you're not, reaching the audience that we want you to, or we don't believe that your message is going to be indicative or inducive to Canadian content. Though I check all the boxes. I am a Canadian. There's absolutely no arguing the fact that I'm an independent media contributor. But under the guise of Bill C-11, they attack everyone that they don't agree with. They attack everyone except for the CBC and the CTV. And then they get on there and they say, wait, still nobody's watching the CBC. Even though if I go and I look for news, the way that they run it, I get a little bar at the bottom saying, Google says, oh, no, we can't show you other results because they've been banned by local legislation. So they are the ones running the censorship, so that all I get to see is CBC, CTV. I don't get any independent news. I have to search for it actively, right? I have to go out and look for the various people. Try to get Fox show up in your feed. Try to get any of the independent media try to get any of the South Asian news to show up in your feed. You get CBC, Global, and CTV over and over and over and over and over again because they're trying to tell you under Bill C-11 that that's cultural. They don't show you anybody else. Some of the YouTube channel that are Canadian content, they don't show up. None of it shows up unless you go looking for it. Like you can find it. But if you're just a random person doing a random feed, right? That's just going to show up for the ones that have always been showing up. And then they say, oh, look, people are watching our stuff. But really, they're not watching your stuff. They're just being force-fed your stuff. And all the Canadians are saying is that if everybody wants to see your stuff so bad, then you shouldn't need to make legislation that directs everybody to own, like drives them only to your channel. You should be able to say, hey, no problem. I mean, you don't see Coca-Cola doing it, do you? But people still go to Coca-Cola. People still buy potato chips. People still buy chocolate bars. People still do all of that stuff because that's what people want. And really what you're doing is crafting legislation that helps the corporations because you're in bed with the billionaires, right? Because you're in bed with the corporations. And any corporation that doesn't do it your way, there's the problem with them, not with you. The idea that you're limiting my access to news based on my geographical location. The idea that you're limiting my access to news based on my political slant. The idea that you're limiting me people having access to me based on the fact that I didn't say something that you might have approved of. All of this is covered under Bill C-11, what they're calling the Online Streaming Act. Now, do I believe that there should be more Canadian content on, TV shows made in Canada? Absolutely, without a doubt. Do I think that when you come in here as a large supplier like Disney or whatever should have, put some money into making Canadian films? Sure, why not? Most of the really good actors in America are born in Canada anyway, right? But that doesn't mean that I should be turned down in the algorithm. I'm just as independent as Amazon. I'm much more so, in fact. So why am I not covered under Canadian content? See, that's what I should have stated in the first place. I'm not protected under being Canadian content unless I get the pre-approval of the large corporations. Well, and it's not just me. It's anyone who is not pre-approved is not covered under the being Canadian content, which is the premise of Bill C-11. That's what I don't agree with anything that she has to say, because what she wants us to do is give her more money so that the CBC can trample down independent people. So they can trample down all of the people who, like me, who just have their idea and who want to be entertaining, as limited as that may be. And then lastly, she'll go, oh, look, they've been around since 1939. Well, I mean, in 1939, there wasn't even a television. So the radio was a big deal. But CBC is still stuck in 1939. They CBC won't play a TV show that doesn't adhere to the far left message. You're not reaching everybody with that far left message. In fact, the fact that you put out nothing but far left content about how, boys are dumb and all of the rest of it that goes along with it. I don't want to repeat it here because it kind of gets me upset. But the idea that you can only show that and no one is watching you should tell you everything you need to know. That should make plain for you the lack of support for that content. The idea that you throw billions of Canadian tax dollars at it and still nobody is watching you. The concept that you can take all of these strong, independent DEI and put them together in a room and they make a show that nobody watches in a network that is strictly controlled and has that channel put to the fore. Well, that should tell you everything you need to know about whether or not you're in the majority or the minority. I get in your echo chamber, you think you're in a majority. But the reality of it is the majority speaks silently. And they would be watching silently. It's called the silent majority for a reason. And I know that you can't grasp that concept because that would mean that you would have to reevaluate not only your philosophical slant, but your entire life. But that's the reality of it. The reality of it is that you live in this tiny little echo chamber that you're trying to force feed people things that only you agree with. And they do not. And rather than scream and yell and jump up and down, they simply elect to ignore you. All right, I'm going to wrap here. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.